I always like to let people know, going forward from this point, we would be on the record. Or is that all right?
Okay.
Okay. I like to let people know what's going on. I don't like surprises. So, Mr. Price, I see that you're looking to become, that you're running for, or reportedly running for the 22nd District, the Republican ticket. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I see that, at least as of the last time I looked, which was about last week, there's been no press releases, there's been no announcements. I do know you met with some Republican chairmen, but as far as public announcement, the only thing there's been is the WNBF radio spots.
Oh, also, there were spots on WHWK as well.
Okay, I didn't hear those, but okay.
Yeah, there were 3 last week, and there will be 1 today as well.
Okay. So you've had a couple of radio spots out, but you haven't said anything to the public.
Well, you know, let me explain.
Please.
When I look at how campaigns are run, I decided to do things a little differently. As you all know, it's always a challenge to get petitions signed and to get on the ballot. And I thought the best way to do that was to reach out to the public first through the medium of radio. As you know, I've had a long career in media and entertainment, so I thought I'd do things a little differently. And I've had a lot of positive response from the ads, and it's had a good effect for me. And of course, as the month goes on, you'll see me more in the media, and you'll see me getting my message out in a different way. I thought that was the most effective way to reach people quickly. Because as you all know, my 2 main opponents for the Republican nomination in the 22nd Congressional District, both George Phillips and Claudia, have kind of a machine behind them. And so I have to work hard to build a base. The best way is to take your case right to the people.
Okay, let me clarify something. You were saying Claudia, you meant Assemblywoman Claudia Tenney.
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure we're clear. You also said they have a machine behind them. Can you clarify, what do you mean by machine?
Well, by machine, I just mean anyone who's involved in politics, whether it's in George's case, running for Congress twice, or Ms. Tenney, being an Assemblywoman, you definitely build a base behind you. I certainly have done a lot of work on the natural gas issue in the past, since roughly 2010. I've never run for office before, so this is all new to me. But I enjoy new things, and I also enjoy giving the voters and the people of this district something different to consider. A true conservative.
Understandable. Well, and I can understand the process of being a first-time candidate. You may or may not be aware, I've also run for Congress myself.
Oh, I know.
Okay. Just letting you know. So I can appreciate it is a challenge to be a first-time candidate, without question. We all understand that.
Yeah.
But one thing I would have to ask is, in going through the process that you've gone through so far, the public hasn't had, nor the media, a chance to understand what are your positions, where do you stand on the issues, why have you been silent on issues that have been currently ongoing. I've searched...
Well, actually, if I can just interrupt briefly, that's one of the reasons I reached out to you today.
Yes.
Was so that you can hear some of my positions and engage in a discussion. When I looked, it took me a while when I first decided to run to kind of figure out what my message should be. And I really looked at our country in a different way than other politicians. As you all know, the federal government has a deficit of $18 trillion. And we're going to keep adding to that with the current policies in place in Washington. The greatest threat to our national security is not the Islamic State. It is ourselves. We literally are bankrupting our nation. And I grew up in a country that had a great future. But if we continue to borrow and spend, the future will be very bleak. I look at this area, the southern tier of New York, as kind of the canary in the coal mine. We've suffered a lot here because of our government's policies. I've country, particularly big urban areas, are still thriving and prospering. But eventually those areas will lose their prosperity too. Our government continues to bankrupt our country. I'm going to Congress to stop the government borrowing and spending. However harsh it is, that is my main goal.
Well, let me ask you.
Because I have a responsibility, not just to myself and the current generation, but the next one. Well, and that's really going to be one of the things I focus on in my campaign. I'm doing a lot of research to put the message together in the best way that ordinary people can understand.
Okay, well, let me ask you. You're saying that you would address the national debt, and how would you do that?
Well, let me give it a little philosophy. You know, love is often the reason we change our lives, but one of the best ways to change government policy is pain. I really believe that if people suddenly had to pay extra to start paying off the debt, they immediately would stop runaway government spending. And I am actually serious about paying down the debt. I'm looking into the exact figure. I would propose that there be a national sales tax to start ridding our country of its debt. Because until people feel the pain in their wallet, in their pocketbook, it'll be easy for other politicians to continue to borrow and spend. I really want to wake up this country to the reality we'll face if we keep on printing money and borrowing and spending. I know that's going to be a very controversial position.
Well, yes.
But a true conservative is one who sees reality as it is and works to change it with concrete proposals.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, you're saying you would create a brand new tax, which would be called a national sales tax.
Yeah.
And this would, opponents or economists would say that would have a negative impact on business and the economy and jobs. You by adding a new tax, you're taking cash available by individuals out of their pocket, and therefore there would be less consumer spending, which would then lead to fewer jobs. How would you address that concern?
Well, you know, that's a great concern, but a false one. What I'm proposing is short-term pain for long-term gain. When you look around the world, when countries get in economic trouble, the first thing they do is they have an austerity package. And it's quite painful, but it works.
Well, that's only... Yeah, I'm sorry. That's only in the case austerity packages are... Well, you're talking about Greece, you're talking about Spain, you're talking about countries that have completely bankrupted.
Well, look at it this way. Math doesn't change. And the fact that we're not completely bankrupt has a lot to do with our power and position in the world. Okay. The fact that we can, because we're so powerful as a nation, we can force other nations to consider us financially solvent, when increasingly we're not. And if it's not today, it'll be tomorrow. The best way to control spending is to make people pay for it out of their pocket. Because then I guarantee you, conservatives will be able to get elected to Congress, into high office, because people will understand the reality of what is being done in their name. And I know it's going to annoy a lot of people, that position. But this campaign is about doing the right thing, not the easy thing. Sooner or later, our country will face an economic disaster because of all of our borrowing and spending. So that's how I approach it.
Okay, I understand. I just want to make sure that I'm not misunderstanding you, and I want to make sure we are on the same page.
Yeah, and one thing I would just say, when you discuss this with other people, I'm still working out the details. Those are forthcoming. But it won't be long in forthcoming. How's that?
Fair enough. Okay. Let me ask then, would your plan also include cutting any departments and changing in spending? That's one.
Definitely.
Okay. Like what?
Well, let's look at what our federal government should do and what our federal government is doing. The federal government really shouldn't have much of a role in K-12 education. That is something that the states can handle and the local school districts can handle. If we were serious about spending, we have to cut the things that government shouldn't be doing and focus on what it should do. You know, the main thing our government should be doing is, of course, protecting us, securing our borders, having a powerful armed forces, making sure the federal court system runs well, taking care of the federal infrastructure, not giving money for education. That's something that should come from the taxpayers of New York, California, Pennsylvania, every other state. So definitely the whole federal education budget is something I look very hard at.
So you would cut, are you saying you would eliminate the Department of Education, or are you saying you're cutting programs in the department?
About the only thing that I would save in the Department of Education would be whatever federal aid goes to aid handicapped children. I don't know if you know this, but my mom was director of handicap education at the Binghamton Central School District for a long time. And I do realize that there are parts of our country that are poor. So I'd like to ensure that the most disadvantaged people continue to get necessary government help. But everything else should be on the backs of the state and local governments, which is what it is meant to be.
Okay. I'm sure you're going to come up with a more detailed plan, and we can get into that as we see that. Let me also address a couple of other things. So the one issue is spending.
Yeah.
You want to put a control on spending, a new tax, possibly cutting some departments such as the Department of Education.
Yeah.
So that's all of the economy related. How would you stimulate jobs?
Well, one of the things that I would like to do to stimulate jobs is, as you all know, the Social Security Trust Fund is basically a giant IOU to the American taxpayer. And what I would like our federal government to do is to create the Sovereign Wealth Fund for the whole Social Security program and invest the money that people pay and businesses pay for Social Security in farms and factories and other businesses all around our country. And I think that's a good way to both stimulate the economy and use tax money a lot more wisely.
Well, one moment. I'm not sure I understand. So the Sovereign Wealth Fund, is that a new tax businesses would pay, or?
No. I mean, simply, instead of, we pay Social Security payroll taxes.
Yes.
It just goes straight to the government,
Right.
And so instead of buying Treasury Bills, the old famous block box, why not invest that money, like with a Sovereign Wealth Fund, like other countries have, and invest it in businesses and farms in our communities. I think that's a good way for the government to stimulate the economy. But I want to add something.
Yes.
I really am not a big proponent in general of the government being involved in the economy. I don't really think it's the federal government's role to stimulate anything. Going forward, I'd like to create America where the government gradually backed out of its role in investing in our economy. And I think that's something that business people can do a lot better.
Okay.
I think our country ran a lot better when the federal government wasn't stimulating the economy.
Okay.
Wouldn't you agree?
I have a lot of opinions. I've written a lot about that. But
I always hear people talk about socialism. Well, what is socialism but the government interfering with how the economy runs? I think the government should just slowly but surely create a level playing field and back off. I think that would be a lot better for America than what's currently going on. If people want true conservative voices, they have to do what conservatives would do.
Okay.
Which is get the federal government out of the economy as much as possible.
Okay.
It's taken decades and decades to create, so it'll take a little while to change how people think and act.
Understandable. But let me clarify. On the Sovereign Wealth Fund, if I understand you correctly, so you're saying that this would be taking the Social Security tax and instead using that and putting it in the market and putting it at market risk. So the recent decrease in the stock market that's just occurred in the last couple weeks. Would, in that case, if the sovereign wealth fund existed, as you said, there would be trillions in losses. How is that productive?
Well, let's look at this two ways. First of all, as you well know, with any kind of pension system, what's the first thing a financial advisor would do? Spread the risk. If all Social Security is owning Treasury Bills, government debt, that's not a good investment strategy. By putting the money to work in the market, we'll get a much better return. You know, when people look at the stock market, they're much too focused on short-term gain and not long-term gain. There's always going to be ups and downs with the stock market. It doesn't mean we shouldn't invest in it. It just means we have to make the right investments.
Well, I would never say that, but I'm also a former stockbroker for a decade, so I understand market risk very, very well. And I understand diversity of assets. Also, the reason why you would want to go with Treasury Bills, which is a preservation of capital with minimal downside risk, which is
I think there's a huge risk.
It is.
I mean, do you really? I mean, look, study history.
I have.
Every country that got in as deep a debt as we are with our federal government eventually starts not keeping its promises or printing money, which is exactly the same thing. So I believe that we should start investing some of that money in actually things that work, like, you know, gas and oil companies, like farms, factories, things that actually produce value. I mean, Social Security is run basically on a giant IOU system. I think that needs to change.
Okay. I just was highlighting that there are certain economic theories and practices for different classes of individuals and returns. So I wasn't saying something against what you're saying. I was just highlighting that some of the people that may hear about this interview may not be aware of that. But you did.
Well, I'm sure you know, some of this stuff is very difficult to explain to average people. And it's easy then for demagogues to distort what you say and what you mean and what you're trying to do. I expect that. But, you know, I also expect that someday our country will wish that they'd return to the ways of old and not continue with policies that will destroy us economically.
Well, I'm trying to make sure that I'm not demagoguing, and I'm trying to make sure...
No, I wasn't saying you were, but
okay.
You know what I mean. You know what I mean.
I do, but I also want to make sure that that's why I'm asking the questions, to make sure I'm clear on you. You brought up something that must be addressed, and as a serious concern, is the secession and fracking. In particular, we were talking about oil and gas. You are the director of Gas Odyssey. You've been a very strong proponent of fracking in New York, even seeking to secede upstate New York to Pennsylvania to allow for fracking. And there are those who would say that this run is an effort to address that issue. Some candidates run for the attention towards an issue. Some are running for the position itself. What would you say to those that would say this is an attempt to gain attention?
Well, a couple things. First of all, I still believe in secession 110%. But I'm not running for Congress to be the first secessionist in Congress since before the Civil War. The reason I'm running for Congress is to do a good job for my district and to do a good job for my nation. The federal government will have a very limited role in secession, as you all know, until it's finally accomplished. I'm not using this as a publicity stunt. It isn't a publicity stunt. It's very serious. When you talk about fracking, how do I say this? People, as you all know, the Cuomo administration is trying to invest money to start businesses all across upstate. Would it be a simpler approach to merely allow fracking like it is in Pennsylvania and stimulate business that way without any need for government intervention? Just let the market take care of it. and let us benefit here in upstate New York as places like Pennsylvania and Ohio benefit. That's the difference between me and liberals, is I don't want the government to do everything. I don't expect it to. I expect through developing our resources that we can make this area prosperous once again. And fracking would do a lot more for Southern Tier than another government handout.
Okay. Hang on. I just want to make sure we're... A lot of these items I'm sure you're going to be discussing more going forward, and obviously we can't cover it in 30 minutes.
Well, it's kind of like I love boxing.
Right.
And the first times you get in the ring, you kind of have to find your way. Get your feet. So I have the right ideas, and as the campaign goes forward, I'll find the best way to get those ideas out there.
Well, let me ask you this. In looking over the history, besides the issue of fracking and secession, you've made no public comments in terms of politics, of issues. Why then are you looking now to get into this race?
I really feel that America is at a turning point. When I look around me and I look ahead into the future, I see a lot of dark days ahead for our country. And I choose to get into this race now because it's the right time. And it is my time, because I'm one of the few politicians who will not only tell the truth, but try and make the truth possible in our country. It's very easy when people get in politics to succumb to the glamour and the pressure, whether that's in Harrisburg or Albany or in Washington. I believe that I will be a very honest voice and a very different voice, because I'm going to remember every day I'm in Washington who I'm working for, and that's the average person in my district, not special interest. And that's really why I threw my hat in the ring, because I believe that I'm the only candidate who will remember that.
Okay.
That's my own opinion, but I know myself very well.
Okay.
And I'll go there and work tirelessly for the average person.
Okay.
I want to do what they want done, even if they don't know how to do it. And that's going to be the difference between having me in Washington and having someone else.
All right. Let me ask you, since we don't know, let's ask, are you familiar with international policy that's ongoing?
Actually, very well, very well.
Okay. So, in one of the biggest...
If I can interrupt you,
sure.
I made a film a little while back called The Gathering Storm, which was about the Middle East and its relation to the United States of America.
Okay, I did not see that in my research. I'm not familiar with that. I will look for it.
Okay.
But looking at the current, the two big topics currently on the international level would have to be ISIS and the civil war in Syria.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of discussion about what we should do, what we shouldn't do, that's ongoing in Congress right now. Where do you believe we should be on both of these issues?
Well, it's super complicated.
Given.
As you all know, the Middle East is a quagmire. I believe the best answer, long-term, to the whole Middle East dilemma is developing our energy resources here in America, oil and gas, and developing the infrastructure in America to allow vehicles to be fueled with natural gas. And that would cut our reliance on any imports from the Middle East of oil and free up a lot more oil for the world market, giving countries in the Middle East less say and leverage over world events. As for the Islamic State, a double game is often played by governments in the Middle East due to the whole Sunni-Shiite divide. Slowly but surely, our government and others are limiting the Islamic State's ability to take more territory, and slowly but surely we are taking territory back. And that's basically the right approach. As for the civil war in Syria, other situation in Syria has been a disaster since day one. Early on, the West has intervened strongly. A decent settlement could have been made. So much blood and destruction has occurred in Syria now that all the groups involved want nothing but victory and nothing but vengeance. That's basically what I would say on that.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand clearly then. In reference to ISIS, you are saying that the current policy, international policy by the Obama administration is working, and you want to continue that process. And in terms,
slowly but surely, the policy is working.
Okay, so you want to continue that course that is currently ongoing. And in terms of Syria, you're saying the U.S. and other nations should step away and let it resolve itself.
Well, the only thing we don't want in Syria is a victory by the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. But our policy towards Syria is complicated by the fact that the current president, the current leader of Syria, will undoubtedly be indicted on war crimes. It's a very difficult situation for us when two of the strongest groups in Syria, which would be the Assad regime and the militant Islamic forces of Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, our government doesn't want anything to do with, correctly. It's next to impossible to intervene in the Syrian civil war until all the sides slug it out, tire of warfare, where there is a clear victor. Our only goal in Syria should be ensuring that that victor is not the Islamic State or any group affiliated with Al-Qaeda. And I think we should take, in a sense, not a hands-off approach, but just see what happens. You know, not every corner of the world can America intervene in. And I know a lot of conservative voters are tired of America being the world's policeman. There are other nations in the world that can intervene, and they should be encouraged to.
Okay.
As you all know, I mean, it's very difficult
to
find a peaceful solution in Syria when the president of Syria is a war criminal.
Well,
and everyone in his regime is a war criminal. And the most powerful factions that are battling the Assad regime are just as bad. Committed to the destruction of Christianity and Western values. It's a no-win situation. Early on, there was a way to make peace, probably a way to get Assad out of there with dignity and still protect the rights of minority groups such as Christians and Kurds in Syria. But as you all know, human nature being what it is, when you have years of horrific violence, including barrel bombs against civilians, massacres of Christians, torture routinely used by all sides, very hard to make peace with things like that going on.
Understandable, and it is a complicated issue, and we can spend, as many people have already, days and days on it. So I understand there is no simple answer. But again,
it's funny. Think about Northern Ireland. How difficult it was to get the Protestants and the Catholics to sit down. And finally, they did with Good Friday. Remember, the level of violence in Northern Ireland was never anywhere close to the horrific violence that the people of Syria have experienced. And that's a real issue for making peace. The same thing happened in Iraq. You know, under really great leadership of our military and under President Bush, we managed to force the groups to more or less come to the table and secure the country. But as soon as Bush left office, the Iraqi government began harassing Sunni citizens in Iraq again. A lot of the Sunni tribal chiefs who worked with us in the Anbar Awakening found themselves off the government payroll of Iraq and found themselves in jail. It's hard to make peace when people refuse to be peaceful, when they refuse to let vendettas and feuds and religious controversies go and work for the best of their nation. What can one do with people who refuse to attach it, instead just want to find another way to stick it in someone. And that's really the problem in the Middle East.
Well, speaking of
commitment
that,
to the Dark Ages, not modernity.
well, speaking of that, that brings up a very interesting question about Iran, which we have the nuclear deal, and obviously that's going to be an issue coming up for the 2017 Congress, what to do about the nuclear deal. Do you support that deal with the Obama administration? Do you oppose it? And if so, why?
Well, here's a couple things. First of all, I know you're a smart guy and you've studied history. You know that every totalitarian regime needs enemies to justify its existence. And the minute they stop creating enemies, the totalitarian regime will fall. Look at the Soviet Union. As soon as Mikhail Gorbachev tried to change how the Soviet Union thought and acted, fell apart. There is no way to make peace with the Islamic State, the Islamic Republic of Iran, because they are committed to a radical, evil agenda. The game that they're playing is merely cheat and retreat. The Obama administration did something great in getting nations around the world to finally put painful, meaningful sanctions on Iran. And as you all know, what's going on now will not disarm Iran. It'll just be Iraq all over again, where inspectors will make inspections that don't work, and Iran will covertly continue its nuclear program. And I want to bring up something.
Sure.
I have looked into the whole issue of disarmament, and I know what disarmament looks like. I'd like to give you several examples. The apartheid regime in South Africa built between 6 and a dozen atomic weapons. Before the fall of the apartheid regime, in the period of transition, they completely disarmed. Those weapons no longer exist. After the end of the Cold War, the independent nations of Belarus and Ukraine were left with considerable amounts of nuclear weapons on their territory. Our government and other governments helped those nations totally disarm. They don't have nuclear weapons anymore. Muammar Gaddafi was a very evil man, but he agreed, in order to get back in the world's better graces, to disarm his chemical and nuclear programs. And after his government was overthrown, they didn't find any secret program. It was completely dismantled because it was done out in the open. All the countries I have mentioned, Libya, Belarus, Ukraine, South Africa, all agreed to disarm, and their leadership meant it. So what happened? The Islamic Republic of Iran has absolutely zero interest in disarming. This is just a way to get out of punishing sanctions and to continue to develop atomic weapons. I have absolutely no faith that that the policy is going on now in regards to Iran will make the region more peaceful. Quite the opposite.
Okay.
How's that?
Well, I'm listening to you.
Okay.
But let me also ask, let's take a different issue, which is going to be coming up in 2000. Well, it's currently a big issue, which is the Second Amendment. That's both the New York SAFE Act, the executive orders by President Obama. Do you support the Second Amendment? Do you agree with the executive orders? Do you see the Second Amendment applying to hunting or how do you see it?
Well, let me put it this way. First of all, more gun control is not the answer to crime. The problem in America is drugs, which produces tons of criminal behavior. And it's also a problem of our culture, because increasingly we have a culture that celebrates death rather than life. And you know what I'm talking about, because when you turn on TV or go to the movies, you see entertainment products that glorify violence and things that shouldn't be glorified in Western culture. I believe it is a fundamental human right of all human beings to be able to defend themselves. As you all know, there is no country, even the most totalitarian country, that can guarantee its citizens security all the time. People have a right to own arms for self-defense. And when I'm in Congress, I will vigorously support our right in this country to continue to keep and bear arms. You know, as for the issue of gun control, we shouldn't worry about gun control as much as we should worry about cultural control. I know that in Switzerland, fairly recently, I'm not sure if it continues this very day, but Swiss men were in the armed forces. They kept fully automatic rifles in their houses. I've never heard of anyone in Switzerland taking that automatic rifle and committing crimes. It's a different culture. We need to address the real problems in America, and firearms are not the problem. People are.
Okay. There's a few things in that I would love to ask questions about, but that may be something we'll follow up on in the future.
Okay.
Let me ask you, right now, since you haven't made, this is the first public announcement, I believe this is an exclusive, am I correct?
It actually is for you.
Okay. Then let me ask you, how is funding going? Obviously, that's a big part of any campaign, and this, especially in a contested campaign as this is becoming, that's a very big issue. How's that coming along?
Well, you know, I've already been in contact with one attorney, and I'm working with others to get my campaign off to a great start so we can raise money. It is difficult because I've never been in politics before. So, but I intend to raise money just like any other candidate and to get my voice out there.
Okay. Have you reached the the $5,000 threshold for the FEC?
No, I haven't. Okay. No, I haven't.
Do you have, obviously this is a 8-county in part or in whole, 8 counties for the 22nd District of New York, and obviously ground support, people on the ground, are an important item. And many of the candidates are finding, as we're seeing, some have stronger support in the north, some in the south. Do you have support across the counties? Are you more popular in the south, the north?
Well, a couple things. First of all, obviously my strongest base will be here in Broome County. That's where people are most familiar with me. But I don't see any divide in our district between Utica and Binghamton or any place else. We're all in the same boat. And my message will have the same appeal north of here as it does right here. I'm going to work hard to reach out to people in every part of my district.
Okay. Okay. And give me a moment. I just want to think through. And I do want to thank you as well for giving us the time to go through these questions. Is there anything else that you would want any of my readers, the general public, at this point that you want to share with them, something that you think would be important for them to know?
Well, this is something I think is important for people to know. I intend to go to Washington to change things, and I intend to be the person who gets things done. I'm not going there to continue business as usual, and I'm going to have a lot of stands on issues that will upset people. But the reason to vote for me and to support me is I'm committed to doing what is right. Not just what is right for Aaron Price, congressional candidate, but what is right for the people of my district and the people all across the United States of America. And I intend to be a maverick, very independent, and I intend to do what needs to be done to save this country from financial ruin. The greatest threat to our national security is not the Islamic State. It's the federal government spending. And I think true conservatives will understand that. And I intend to get that message out there strong in the weeks and months ahead.
Okay. Well, we look forward to being able to speak with you more about this as we go forward, and to hear more from you about what's going on. We'll as I'm sure you're aware, we always are willing to hear any voice and make sure that voice is out there.
Okay.
So we're looking forward to that. Just stay in touch with us. We want to hear more, and I'm sure other people will as well.